The royal family had gathered expecting an evening of polished smiles, careful conversation, and flawless ceremony. Instead, one cutting remark transformed the private reception into a scene of stunned silence. Princess Catherine stood motionless, as Camilla questioned her judgment in front of Charles, William, Anne, Edward, Sophie, and the younger royals. Then a chair scraped against the floor. The king rose, his face burning with anger, and the entire room realized the evening had changed forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine had spent the evening discussing a program for children and families, one of the causes shaping her public role. Windsor Castle, the royal residence hosting the gathering, had seen countless controlled family occasions, but this one carried unusual weight. Her success had become impossible to ignore. Charles had given her greater ceremonial duties, meaning more responsibility at official events, while William watched with pride. Camilla watched too, but her silence held something colder. The tension broke without warning. The Queen declared that Catherine was performing compassion for the cameras. She then said the princess lacked the maturity to represent the crown during a national crisis. The crown, in plain terms, meant the monarch and the institution surrounding the sovereign. Every face changed. Edward lowered his eyes. Sophie froze. Anne stared directly at Camilla, while George looked toward his mother in confusion. Catherine felt the insult land, but she refused to strike back. She placed her glass on the table, steadied her voice, and asked whether Camilla truly intended to question her integrity in front of her children. The words were quiet. Their effect was not. William moved beside his wife at once, making his loyalty unmistakable. Charles saw George watching, and the king understood that the attack had reached beyond Catherine. It had entered the mind of the future heir. Camilla did not apologize. She insisted that several members of the royal household agreed with her. The royal household was the network of staff and offices supporting the family's official work. That claim changed everything because it suggested private briefings and a deeper attempt to weaken Catherine before those closest to her. Charles rose so sharply that his chair struck the floor. He told Camilla she had crossed a boundary he had warned her never to approach. Then he ordered everyone except Catherine, William, and the Queen to leave. Anne remained seated for several seconds before standing. As the doors closed, Charles turned toward Camilla, no longer as a husband protecting a marriage, but as a monarch confronting a threat inside his own household. The humiliation lasted only minutes, but it exposed years of insecurity, resentment, and unspoken fear. Catherine was not merely a princess embarrassed at dinner. She was a mother attacked before her children and a future queen forced to defend her character. Camilla was not simply delivering an insult. She was fighting against the growing belief that the monarchy's future had already moved beyond her. And Charles was trapped between his marriage, his heir, and the crown. Catherine sat beside William in a quiet side room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. As the wife of the future king, she carried duties that reached far beyond public appearances. A senior working royal was a family member who represented the monarch through official service, and her growing role placed her closer to the center of the institution. Yet her deepest concern was not rank. It was George, Charlotte, and Louis. Catherine admitted that Camilla's words had hurt, but seeing George understand the cruelty had wounded her more. William listened without interrupting, his anger held behind a rigid calm. He told her that silence had protected the appearance of family unity for years, but it had also given resentment room to grow. The prince feared that restraint was now being mistaken for weakness. Camilla remained in the reception room, gripping the back of a chair as the final footsteps faded. She had gained the title and position she had once fought to secure, yet Catherine's ease with the public made her feel increasingly replaceable. Comparisons with Diana still followed the queen consort, reopening an old fear that affection could never be commanded by status. She felt cornered, but she showed no regret. Sophie entered the side room and closed the door behind her. The trusted confidant revealed through a private conversation that Camilla had questioned several courtiers during the previous month about Catherine's schedule, speeches, and preparation meetings. Courtiers were palace officials who supported royal duties and carried information between households. Her account suggested planning, not impulse. Charles reached the same conclusion alone in his study. He removed his glasses, pressed his fingers against his eyes, and replayed every word. The king understood that the insult had been built from private details gathered in advance. Someone had helped shape it. Then Anne's handwritten message arrived. The Princess Royal, meaning the monarch's senior daughter carrying a special lifelong title, had written only one warning. This began at Sandringham. Ask her what she said after Catherine's speech. And Anne had heard every dangerous word. The note forced Charles to look beyond Windsor and toward an earlier gathering where Camilla had already revealed how far she was prepared to go. Every royal rupture has a moment that later feels inevitable. For this family, that moment came weeks earlier, inside a private drawing room at Sandringham. The evening had ended, the staff had withdrawn, and Catherine's successful speech was still being praised. Then Camilla leaned toward a senior advisor and said the Princess of Wales was becoming too powerful to control. Anne heard every word. She said nothing that night. But from that moment forward, she began watching the Queen with new suspicion. Catherine had announced a major program supporting children and families, turning years of work into a national promise. Sandringham, one of the monarch's private country residences, had hosted the reception because Charles wanted the initiative discussed away from public pressure. Her speech mattered because it showed that royal service could address modern fears without losing its sense of duty. Guests praised her calm delivery, and senior advisors gathered around her with questions. Charles encouraged that attention. The king repeatedly asked Catherine to explain how the program would reach parents, schools, and local communities. He then praised her ability to connect tradition with concerns. Camilla heard every compliment. Each one deepened the fear that the monarchy's future image was being built around another woman. The room changed after the guests left. Camilla leaned toward a senior courtier and said Catherine's influence had to be restrained before she became the only woman the public sees when they look at the crown. A courtier was a palace official trusted with planning and private information. The remark was not careless. It was a warning. Anne stepped through the adjoining doorway and confronted her quietly. The princess told Camilla that competing with the future queen would wound Charles and split the family. She also warned that attacking Catherine's role would eventually touch William and the children. Camilla's voice shook as she answered. Anne, she said, could never understand decades of being measured against Diana. Camilla promised the words came from frustration and would go no further. Anne accepted that promise, but she kept watching. Weeks later, the same courtier passed the Queen internal notes criticizing small changes Catherine had made to a royal engagement. Those notes supplied the language used at Windsor. Anne gave Charles a documented account of the Sandringham exchange and admitted why she had remained silent. The king read it twice. Camilla had not lost control for one cruel moment. She had broken a direct promise and carried the resentment forward. Charles summoned her to his private sitting room. When Camilla entered, copied briefing notes were waiting between them. The papers destroyed every excuse, and the king was ready to demand the truth she had avoided. There were no aides, private secretaries, or family advisors inside the room. Only Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine remained beneath the muted light of the Windsor sitting room. On the table lay the documents used to discredit the princess. The king asked one direct question. Had Camilla deliberately prepared the attack? When she refused to answer, he struck his palm against the table and declared that humiliation would never again be mistaken for royal authority. Charles began again, this time with a controlled voice that made the silence feel heavier. He asked who had supplied the internal briefing notes, and why Camilla had chosen to use them before the family. Briefing notes were private summaries prepared to guide royal duties and decisions. Their misuse mattered, because trust inside the household depended on sensitive information remaining protected. William stood beside Catherine but allowed his father to lead. The prince understood that this was larger than one insult. If the king could not impose discipline inside his own household, every future decision involving the Wales family could be weakened by private rivalry. Catherine remained composed, yet her restraint only sharpened the tension. Camilla finally spoke. She claimed Catherine had been treated as beyond criticism and protected from honest questions. The princess met her gaze and answered that criticism was not the same as accusing someone of false compassion before their children. She added that George had watched every expression in the room and that no title could undo what he had seen. Camilla turned toward Charles and accused him of abandoning her whenever William's family was involved. She insisted that she had spent years earning her place, only to be expected to surrender it quietly whenever Catherine entered the center of attention. The Queen's anger carried fear, but it did not soften the damage. Charles erupted. He told her that Catherine's dignity was not an attack on Camilla's position, and that cruelty could never be disguised as self-protection. The king demanded the truth once more. Camilla admitted requesting the notes. Through that private, recorded family conversation, she also revealed that another household figure had urged her to challenge Catherine publicly. Yet she refused to name the person. Catherine then noticed her glance toward a sealed folder marked by the Queen's household, the office supporting Camilla's official work. Charles immediately suspended her access to joint family briefings until a full internal review could be completed. William warned that restrictions would not repair what had happened before the children. The confrontation had exposed the anger, but the next battle would be fought through offices, schedules, patronages, and the quiet machinery deciding who truly held power inside the modern monarchy. Royal power rarely announces itself with shouting. It appears in revised schedules, cancelled meetings, missing briefing papers, and doors that no longer open. By morning, Camilla discovered that the consequences of the Windsor confrontation had already begun. Her joint engagements with Catherine were suspended. Her staff were ordered to surrender internal correspondence. And inside Charles's office, the king faced a brutal decision: protect the marriage that had defined his private life, or protect the future monarchy embodied by William and Catherine. Charles sat alone with two revised engagement schedules placed before him. As sovereign, he remained the head of the monarchy and held final authority over royal duties. William, however, represented the institution's next direction, while senior household officials controlled the flow of papers, meetings, and access, linking both generations. That balance mattered because a private feud could now shape the public future of the crown. Catherine asked for no revenge. In a documented conversation with the king's private secretary, she requested firm boundaries preventing family grievances from being used during official work. Her restraint made the decision harder for Charles, not easier. She was protecting the institution, even after the institution had failed to protect her. Charles studied Camilla's name beside Catherine's on an upcoming joint appearance. His fountain pen hovered for several seconds. Then the king drew one clean line through the engagement. The gesture felt small, but its meaning was brutal. Neutrality would look like approval, and approval would tell William that his wife's humiliation carried no lasting consequence. Camilla discovered the restrictions through a revised access notice delivered to her office. She summoned her chief aide, pushed a folder across the desk, and demanded to know who had surrendered the internal emails. The aide denied responsibility, but the Queen's fear sharpened when the review team requested messages from every member of her staff. The evidence arrived quickly. Investigators found weeks of notes recording negative observations about Catherine's speeches, clothing choices, and meeting style. One message described a planned correction before the family. That phrase destroyed any claim that the Windsor attack had been spontaneous. Someone had designed the moment to weaken the princess before those whose respect mattered most. Charles read the message twice before calling William into his office. Through that private meeting, the monarch revealed he was considering removing Camilla from every strategic discussion involving the Wales family and the next reign. William gave no immediate answer. The silence between father and son carried weight of everything still unresolved at Windsor. By the time the prince left, the conflict was no longer about one insult. It had become a formal separation between the present queen and the monarchy's future. The first consequences arrived without ceremony. A name disappeared from a meeting agenda. A joint appearance was quietly reassigned. Staff members who once passed freely between royal offices were told to request permission. Inside the palace, everyone understood the message. Camilla had not merely offended Catherine. She had lost Charles's trust. Yet the deepest punishment came when the Queen learned that the younger royals had asked not to attend any private gathering where another confrontation might occur. Camilla received the revised schedule in her private sitting room and read it twice. Meetings involving the Prince and Princess of Wales had been removed from her diary, along with succession planning and family events attended by George, Charlotte, and Louis. Succession planning meant preparation for how royal duties and authority would pass to the next generation. The restriction mattered because it cut her away from the family's future. Camilla removed her glasses, folded the paper, and asked her aide to leave. The Queen then looked toward a photograph of herself beside Charles. Anger had protected her until that moment, but fear finally broke through. She understood that the attack on Catherine had not only damaged trust, it may have changed her marriage permanently. Palace staff divided almost at once. Some believed Charles had acted with necessary force, while others feared that separate offices and cancelled appearances would expose the fracture during public duties. The king heard both arguments, but refused to reverse course. His authority depended on proving that private cruelty carried consequences. Catherine faced a different pain. She sat privately with George and told him that adults sometimes use hurtful words when they feel afraid. The princess did not excuse what had happened, but she refused to teach her son that power meant answering humiliation with humiliation. George listened closely, then asked whether the family would ever sit together again. She promised only that the adults would try to make the next gathering safer. William soon learned through a written memorandum from Charles's office that the king intended to create a family protocol. The document would ban personal accusations during official events and private gatherings involving the children. A protocol was a clear set of rules guiding conduct, and this one would turn a moral boundary into an enforceable standard. Anne then contacted Catherine through a private telephone call. The Princess Royal revealed that Camilla had requested a meeting without Charles or William present. Catherine paused. The request could bring an apology, an excuse, or another confrontation. Catherine finally agreed on one condition: no aids, no prepared statements, and no titles. With the palace machinery stripped away, she and Camilla would face each other as two women with nowhere left to hide. The room chosen for the meeting was small, private, and deliberately plain. No portraits watched from the walls. No secretaries waited outside with briefing folders. Catherine arrived first and stood beside the window. Camilla entered moments later, closed the door herself, and remained near it as though uncertain whether she deserved to come farther. For the first time since the humiliation, neither woman had an audience. What followed was not another royal confrontation, but a painful confession. Catherine spoke first. She said she had not agreed to the meeting to defend her work or negotiate her dignity. The princess had come because resentment hidden inside a family always returned in a more damaging form. That mattered now because William and the children had already been pulled into a conflict they did not create, while Charles was being forced to govern emotions he should never have had to police. Camilla listened without interruption. Then, through the private conversation, she admitted that Catherine's rising prominence had awakened an old fear. The queen believed she would always be treated as temporary, tolerated only until a younger and more admired woman became the public face of the monarchy. Her title gave her status, but it could not guarantee affection. Catherine asked the question that had followed her since Windsor. Why had Camilla chosen to attack her before George, Charlotte, and Louis? The queen's expression changed. She confessed that she had focused so completely on defeating a threat that she had never considered how deeply the children would absorb the moment. Camilla explained that years of comparison had hardened her instinct to strike before she could be pushed aside. Catherine answered without cruelty. Past pain could explain fear, she said, but it could not erase responsibility for using that fear against someone else. Camilla finally apologized directly. She did not apologize for the disruption, the embarrassment, or the restrictions imposed afterward. The queen apologized for questioning Catherine's character before her family. She also named the aide who had encouraged the challenge, and confirmed that the staff member repeatedly warned her that Catherine intended to marginalize her. Catherine refused Camilla's offer of a public appearance designed to display unity. Trust, she said, had to be rebuilt privately before the country was shown an image that did not yet reflect the truth. Camilla reached the door, then turned back and asked whether forgiveness remained possible. Catherine held her gaze. Possible, yes. Immediate, no. For once, the boundary between them was honest, painful, and unmistakable. The apology had not erased Windsor, but it changed the crisis. When Charles learned what Camilla had admitted, he knew the family's response could no longer remain hidden. By the following morning, the private conflict had become impossible to contain. The country did not hear every word spoken at Windsor, but it saw the consequences. Engagements changed. Camilla appeared alone. Catherine entered a public event beside William, with an expression of calm determination. Then one photograph captured the entire crisis. The princess kneeling to speak with a young girl outside Kensington Palace, while newspapers behind the barriers carried headlines declaring that dignity, not rank, had decided the royal confrontation. Palace communications confirmed that schedules had been revised after a private family disagreement. The phrase sounded careful, but it convinced no one. Palace communications meant the official statements used to explain royal activity to the public, and their importance rested on trust. Once people sensed that the language concealed deeper conflict, every cancelled engagement became evidence of a fracture. Broadcasters quickly framed the episode as a test of Charles's leadership and Catherine's place at the emotional center of the monarchy. The king was no longer judged only by how he handled Camilla privately. He was being judged by whether he could protect the future institution represented by William, his wife, and their children. Catherine arrived outside Kensington Palace for a children's mental health engagement and found a crowd waiting behind the barriers. Kensington Palace was both a royal residence and a working base for senior family members. One young girl stepped forward holding a handwritten card. "Thank you for staying kind," it read. Catherine knelt to accept it and paused before answering. The princess looked moved, while William remained close enough to understand the weight of the moment. A photograph of that exchange appeared beside a front page calling her the princess who refused to strike back. The image turned private restraint into a public verdict. Charles watched the television coverage alone in his study. The king felt relief at Catherine's composure, but sorrow followed quickly. His family's wounds had become part of the monarchy's public image, and no statement could pull them back into privacy. The internal review then delivered its result through a documented disciplinary report. The aide named by Camilla admitted exaggerating Catherine's intentions and encouraging rivalry between the two royal offices. The staff member was removed from sensitive duties immediately. Camilla released a restrained written statement accepting responsibility for causing personal hurt. The Queen blamed neither staff nor pressure. Her decision mattered because public responsibility would mean nothing unless it was followed by consequences inside the royal family itself as well. Charles then summoned the entire family to Windsor. They returned to the castle where the humiliation began, but this time the king intended to make the room witness accountability instead of cruelty. The final gathering was quieter than the first. No one touched the drinks placed before them. Catherine sat beside William, while Camilla remained across the room near Charles. The king did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He told the family that rank could never excuse deliberate humiliation, and that the monarchy would lose its moral authority if those closest to the crown could not show one another basic dignity. Then he announced his decision. Charles confirmed that rivalries would never again influence official duties, household briefings, family gatherings, or the treatment of the royal children. Official duties meant public responsibilities carried out for the monarch. The king made clear that private resentment could not shape public service. Camilla would remain queen and continue her charitable work. However, she would no longer enter strategic discussions concerning the Wales family without Catherine and William. Strategic planning meant preparing future roles, responsibilities, and decisions. The restriction did not erase her position, but it placed a boundary around her influence. Charles then turned toward Catherine. Through the recorded family meeting, he apologized for failing to recognize the hostility before it reached Windsor. The monarch admitted that she should never have been forced to defend her character before George, Charlotte, and Louis. Catherine accepted his words, but she refused false harmony. Respect, she said, could not be manufactured through photographs or ceremonial appearances. It had to be proven over time. Camilla rose before the relatives who had witnessed the insult. The Queen repeated her apology to Catherine, William, and the children, admitting that fear had driven her to attack someone who had never attacked her. She offered no defense. Anne then confirmed through the disciplinary report that the identified aide had been permanently removed from every role involving family strategy. The Princess Royal explained that the channel used to feed suspicion between households had been dismantled. William told Charles that the decision protected more than Catherine. It taught his children that the crown's authority depended on self-control, responsibility, and the courage to admit wrongdoing. The crisis did not create instant affection between Catherine and Camilla. It created something stronger: boundaries, accountability, and an end to unchecked resentment. Charles's eruption was remembered not for its volume, but for the line it drew. He chose Catherine's dignity, his grandchildren's safety, and the monarchy's future over silence. The evening that began with humiliation ended with a family forced to confront itself. By choosing accountability over denial, the crown finally proved clearly what it had to represent. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.